the gold loss from death and reduces the amount of time spent dead. Now, this
to je jak useless věc. Takže v roce 2009, když jsi umřel, taky to vzalo goldy v lolku, jo. Si to redukovalo čas, kdy jsi byl mrtvý. Jak vypadaly ability v lolku v roce 2009? No ukáž. Já jsem to hrál až do roku 2012, takže uniklo mi něco?
Legends abilities like in 2009. Well, let's find out. Over 14 years ago, League of Legends Clash of Fates launched with 40 unique champions for its
se jmenoval Clash of Fates, no. A oni to naštěstí zrušili ten název.
Players to try. Now, most of these champions would be easily recognizable to you and me today, but their kits and abilities were very, very different. I know this because recently I found an archived Riot Games.
Ty vole, to je jak Lidl. A ten Balfight vypadá dneska skoro stejně, mi přijde. A ve hře má stejný model, jako v té době, si myslím, úplně, ale úplně stejný model. A i Veigar má stejný model jako v té době, že? Si myslím, jako postavičku. Ale ostatní už nějaký update dostali, kromě Čugáta teda ještě, no.
Webpage describing the original kits of League's oldest champions. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 abilities on this page I had never seen or heard of before. So we can answer the question, what were League of Legends abilities like in 2009? At number 10 is Ashe with her Gold E Archer's Mark. It was a passive that said each time Ashe kills a unit, she gains some extra gold. And that amount of gold would go up
to je TF pasivka, ne? V podstatě.
Each time Ashe leveled up the ability. This one is really interesting to me because I feel like Ashe is kind of defined by her Hawkshot. It's such an important ability for her. And the fact that she didn't originally have Hawkshot is
co ani nepamatuju, že by tohle měla, co?
Wild to me. Like, this is just so much less useful than Hawkshot. Also, kind of a funny thing is the ability icon for Archer's Mark is Teemo's ultimate, which is kind of
cože?
Weird, but I guess they used it twice.
Čekej, titulky, more. Ať rozumíte, čete aspoň trošku.
Really not sure. Next up is Soraka with their old ultimate, Purify. Purify is an active ability which reads, cleanses all debuffs and restores a significant amount of health to a target-friendly unit.
To zrušilo všechny debuffy? Soraka Erko.
I imagine this would have worked pretty similarly to how Milio's ultimate works now, where it's like this massive AoE cleanse, but instead it was just a point-and-click cleanse on one champion. It just feels so weird thinking that Soraka used to not have Wish. Like, Wish is such a integral ability to Soraka, such a foundational part of her kit, and it
jo, ona neměla ten AoE heal, nebo jako heal úplně na všechny.
Used to not exist. It used to just be Purify, which is kind of funny. Next up on the list.
To se jí nematu, já si vždycky pamatuju s tím Erkem. Ale vím, že tady je jí Včko, takže ona doplňovala HPčko a i manu. Ona doplňovala všechno.
At number 8.
Ečkem doplňovala manu, myslím, že.
8 is Master Yi with his ultimate Highlander. Now, it shares the same name, but it does something very different. Highlander isn't active again, and it reads, Master Yi enters a trance, where he becomes immune to magic. Additionally, if he is alone, his movement speed is greatly increased. So you know now how Highlander, when you pop it on Master Yi, you're immune to slows.
Myslím, že není potřeba zvedat počet banů, já myslím, že jich je dost furt.
Which is great, obviously. But imagine you're not just immune to slows, you're immune to all CC and any form of magic damage. That's what they're referencing here. Basically, any spell thrown at you would do.
Byl imunní na CCčka, ty vole, v tomhletom. No, Olaf Erko, jakože Master dřív.
Thing when you were in Highlander. The idea of Master Yi just being completely immune to all CC and magic damage is just so stupid to even think about. Also, super quick, I'm giving away $25 of RP to someone who comments on this video, so make sure to leave a comment and let me know what you think of this list and these crazy abilities. At number 7, we have Tristana and her old W, which was Draw a Bead. It was, again, an active, and it reads, Tristana aims much more carefully, increasing her attack range, but slowing her movement speed. This ability replaces Tristana's current W, her rocket jump. So it kind of completely changes how Tristana would have been played back then. Instead of being an AD carry who like jumps on top of somebody's head and blows them up, she was more of like a artillery AD carry who would, I'm guessing, stand still and just shoot super, super fast. It's almost like they were trying to make her like a Gatling gun sort of AD carry instead of how she ended up being with the jumps and the resets. Next up at number 6.
Počkej, ona neměla resety na tom.
Was Draw a Bead. It was again an active, and it reads, Tristana aims much more carefully, increasing her attack range, but slowing her.
Že to dávalo větší attack range, ale slownulo to její movement speed. Blbost. Aha. To musela mít strašně krátkou chvilku, si myslím, protože ty jumpy si pamatuju normálně od Season 2 už.
His Q, which was called Seal Fate. I'm sure most of you know that Twisted Fate has had tons of changes throughout the years where.
Jo, on měl teleport jako normální abilitu, no. tady tenhle. Měl to přes celou mapu. Měl to jako abilitu, která měla cooldown třeba 20 sekund nebo tak něco, no.
He used to be able to teleport on his E for 30 seconds or whatever the hell, but this
Protože byl v dotě takovýhle champ, jakoby, který se takhle portil úplně skoro stejně v dotě jedničce. Teda to měl docela krátký cooldown taky, no.
ability I think is more interesting because I don't think many people know about it. The ability reads, Twisted Fate reveals the cursed fate of his enemy. That enemy takes periodic damage until the curse runs out or until he can kill an enemy unit. From looking online and doing a bit more research, from how I understand it, this basically was like an ignite. So you would Q someone, they would take damage over time, but if the enemy last hit a creep...
Nature Prophet se jmenoval, aha. No měl jakoby model toho z Warcraftu, jak se jmenuje. Malfurion z Warcraftu měl model. Ale v pohodě otázka, jenom prostě, já nevím, proč se mě lidi ptají, co méním za čempa, když mám všude na profilu celý syna, no. Tak.
The ignite would just stop. It sounds like an interesting minigame when you read it and you think about it, because there's nothing really like that in the game right now, but it sounds awful. Like, I don't think it would be a very good ability at all. It's still kind of a funny piece of Twisted Fate history that isn't usually talked about, though. At number 5, we have Morgana and her old Q, which was still called Dark Binding, but the actual ability was quite different. It wasn't active, and the ability reads, Morgana channels dark energy into a single enemy, causing immense pain that deals damage each second and slowing its movement speed.
Takže nějaký jako Malzahar Ečko třeba, který dává damage, slowuje a...
From how it sounds, her old Q was like the first part of Soul Shackles now, but with damage over time. And this makes sense because Morgana didn't used to have Soul Shackles as an ultimate. Her old ultimate was called Echoing Pain, which read, any damage done to a target is increased considerably. So she'd basically select a target and they would just take more damage. But what's really weird to me is she did used to have Tormented Soil, so she used to have 2 damage over time abilities when she first launched, which is why I'm sure they eventually swapped out her old Dark Binding with her new Dark Binding and then made her old Dark Binding
Takže to Erko, co měla, tak měla na kvečku, jo.
The first part of Soul Shackles, which is kind of like an interesting history piece on Morgana on where that ultimate came from. We're moving on now to number 4, which is Fiddlesticks and his old passive Paranoia. Paranoia reads, Fiddlesticks' mere presence is enough to cause fear in his enemies, causing them to miss on their attacks. Enemies within his aura have a chance to miss
Měli větší šanci na to dát miss autoataku.
On each attack. Applies to minions and turrets. This is another really
Cože, turrety a minioni mohli misovat v jeho přítomnosti.
interesting part of Old League where there was a lot
Kámo, ten starý Fiddle vůbec nevypadá strašidelně, to je takový
more RNG or
goofy
chance
prostě
elements in the game. I'm sure tons of you know about
strašák
the
gozelí,
dodge
no.
mechanic with Jax or a bunch of champions where you could essentially just miss your attacks. But I can just imagine the idea of being so close to killing a Fiddlesticks or he tower dives you and then the tower shot misses or your ability misses, just being so infuriating to play against. And the fact that it has no counterplay just adds to that frustration. Okay, we are now moving into the top 3, and at number 3, we have Teemo with his old R, Scout's Bounty. His old R reads, Teemo selects a target champion for 30 seconds. If they die during that time, Teemo gains extra gold. So essentially, this was a point-and-click debuff that Teemo could use to get extra gold if he got a kill, and I believe it also reduced armor from reading some posts on Reddit about this ability. But yeah, not anything like his current ultimate, Noxus Trap. This ability is just so boring for Teemo. Like, comparing it to what Teemo ended up having with Noxus Trap, it's just not even close. And thinking of Teemo's kit as it is, like if you just had Blinding Dart, Move Quick, the
to je docela nudný účko, no, co si budem.
damage over time poison, and then if you had Scout's Bounty, Teemo feels like a really bad champion. As annoying as it is as well, you can't deny that Noxus Trap is one of the most iconic abilities in the game. You really can't imagine Teemo without it. And so I think that this change was definitely for the better. At second place on our list, we have Ryze and his old W, Mana Leach. Mana Leach reads, Ryze's attacks siphon mana off of enemy units, bestowing it upon himself. I can't think of any other character that steals mana from other champions, and I'm honestly kind of surprised Riot never played around with that idea more inside the
To myslím, že měla i později, ale nejsem si jistý.
game. But having an on-hit ability on a mage just seems kind of like a waste of a slot.
A jednu dobu byl Ryze strašně OP a měl všechny spely point click, že se nemusel jediný spell jako trefovat jako skillshot a prostě zaplst to Rko ti dalo strašný buffy na damage a strašně nízký cooldowny a ty jel prostě jednu abilitu za druhou a vymázal celý enemy tým třeba za 3 sekundy, no.
And I'm sure that's why they ended up changing his kit around so that he didn't end up having mana leak.
Točil jsem tam milion spelů po sobě.
The concept is really cool. The idea of Ryze being able to steal mana is really cool because he's like a really mana hungry battle mage. But
Jsem si jistý, že jsem si za něho dal možná i první pentu a za Katarinu asi druhou, tuším někdy v té season 2 nebo 3, no. Za tyhle 2 jsem si dal první penty.
I think in practice this ability was probably very bad. And lastly, at number 1 with the
Kayle.
weirdest lost ability I could find, we have Kayle. Kayle's old E used to be Intervention. It was an active ability that read, targeted buff, castable on any friendly champion, decreases the gold loss from death and reduces the amount of time spent dead. Now this
To je jak useless věc. Takže v roce 2009, když jsi umřel, tak ti to vzalo goldy v lolku, jo. Ti to redukovalo čas, kdy jsi byl mrtvý.
ability is cool for a myriad of reasons. Up first, you've got decreases the gold loss from death, which sounds really strange because you don't lose gold when you die in League. As many of you know,
To je v Dotě, myslím, že no.
though, League of Legends was originally based on Dota, and in Dota, you do lose gold when you die. So I'm assuming that when the game was early in alpha or maybe even beta, you did lose gold when you die, and this ability helped to decrease that, which is really interesting. And then you have the second part of this ability, which is reduces the amount of time spent dead. Obviously today we have Auction with his W passive on how that just straight up revives, like could revive your entire team basically. So the fact that this ability used to just reduce one champion's...
To tě napadlo. Možná by se dalo s těma interama, nebo s lidma, který hrajou toho zasadného Siona a mají 20 smrtí. Možná když máš třeba víc jak 5 smrtí v řadě, tak by ti to mohlo začít brát goldy, ne, ta hra. Možná by to motivovalo, vole, všechny boss hráče, aby přestávali nabíhat pod turety, no. Třeba.
Time spent dead seems pretty bad, but it's still just such an interesting thing. Like we've never seen anything like this in the game since then, and we most likely never will. Either way though, this ability is still super interesting to read, and I honestly think it was probably pretty useless, but the fact that something like this was in the game where you could decrease the gold loss and reduce time spent dead is just so interesting and cool to read and hear about. And I hope you found this ability interesting as well as the other 9 we talked about in today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And if you've been liking my content recently and want to see more of me in your feed, it would mean the absolute world if you could subscribe. We're going for 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year.
OK, subscribe jsem dal už. Like dám taky. Solid video, ale myslím, že tam byly nějaký jako zajímavější věci teda. Myslím, že tam byly nějaký větší brutality, ale asi vybral ty nejlepší, no, co si budem. Nový systém bounty a nevím, je to zvláštní, no, když dostáváš, vole, shutdown 318 goldů, vole. Je to zajímavý, no. Asi to mají nějak spočítaný, doufám, že to prostě funguje, no.